Hello everyone, hope all of you are doing good. So welcome to day 19 today. We will study of the making of the Indian Constitution. Okay. Now let's see what is the political science touch, right, that is required in the understanding of this particular theme. So when we talk of the making of the Indian Constitution and the legacies of the British rule, all right, so you need to understand that this entire process of constitution writing, we are looking at it as a modern phenomena, all right, and modern phenomena which has started in the 18th, 19th and 20th century, all right. So we will be looking at how the waves of constitution making has happened in the world, then how post-colonial constitutions developed after the end of the British rule, end of the French rule, how it happened in countries like Asia, Africa, Latin America, all right. Then what has been India's case? What is it that India adopted very uniquely, okay, which was a different path than other countries in South Asia. Then what are the strategies that have been adopted by constitution makers in this regard? Okay, what were the different social and political perspectives existing in India at that point of time on various issues, all right. Then we will be talking of the major streams of thinking on the future economic development also, fine. Then what was the Constituent Assembly, what was the composition, what were its functions. Then what have been the legacies of the British rule also in this regard, and criticism of constitution making as a process. So when you study this topic, making of Indian Constitution in the context of political science, okay, so this is the nature of the strategies that have been adopted by the Constituent Assembly. What were the key philosophical debates, what were the key legal debates, what were the key social and economic debates, right, existing, because our constitution is not only a legal document, it is also a social revolution, it is an economic revolution, it lays down a chart for a welfare state in that regard, fulfilling all the aspirations of the masses, fine. So what were these debates that existed while making of this constitution? What was the basis of their origin? This idea has to be very, very clear, okay. And there are scholars who talk of these various strategies, what has been adopted by India, fine. Now let's move to the question of the day. So this portion is quite ignored in this manner. Usually students only know what are the political, philosophical, social perspectives. They do not understand the whole idea of constitution making and strategies adopted by the Constituent Assembly, okay. So these are things that you should be reworking. I have incorporated them in the notes, go through them, fine. Now let's read the question. The constitution makers faced the great task, okay, faced the great task of forging a common national identity in the face of unparalleled social and cultural diversity in India, comment, okay. So they are saying that yes, we were trying to build a common national identity. In what context here, all right, because we had a lot of diversity also in this regard. So firstly, you need to talk about the diversity of India, and this diversity existing along multiple lines, right. So there are a lot of cultural, regional, right, challenges that was been existing, right. Now when we are talking of a common national identity, so what is this common national identity? So this common national identity is represented where? This common national identity is representing of we as the people within the constitution, within the constitution. So how we are looking within the constitution, the whole let of or the whole subset of diversities, and despite the diversity, how this common national identity is binding all of us together, okay? So within the making of the constitution, despite these cultural diversities, regional diversity, religious diversities, gender, okay, how we have overcome all these problems. And obviously this diversity has been a challenge at this point of time because we had just witnessed a partition. So there was a double burden in this regard, that because of partition also there have been a lot of cleavages, right? There has been a lot of disturbance that existed with respect to different communal groups. And after this partition also, to what extent we were able to bring in a common national identity in the form of representing within the constitution. Okay, this is the spirit of what? This common national identity, this is the spirit of this particular question. Okay, so first we will be talking of in the introduction, the diversity of India, ethnic, regional, cultural, religious. Then how after the partition these cleavages were deep. Despite that, India had to stand out as a democratic nation, right? So we had a lot of, the founding fathers of the Indian Constitution wanted to lay democratic basis of the Indian Constitution making, of the Indian state, the vision that we were envisaging as a society together, okay? So we wanted to lay the nation building on democratic aspirations, democratic credentials. So you talk of this point. Then you say that what were the ways to address this diversity, okay? So there is a scholar, his name is Sujit Chaudhary, and he talks of how India adopted various mechanisms in order to ensure that we can have institutional mechanisms within the constitution, the spirit of these various institutional mechanisms, different philosophies within the constitution, so that we could achieve a democratic aspiration of the masses. So Sujit Chaudhary says that there was a set of institutions, alternative institutions that have been adopted, okay? So we brought in decentralization, we brought in devolution of power, right? Power sharing in various areas, right? Rule of law, all these have been there, okay, within the constitution as mechanisms, as institutions to adopt over these problems. Another view has been given by whom? By Hannah Lerner. What is her view? Hannah Lerner says that we see that where there is a lot of diversity and cleavages within the society, there are incrementalist strategies that have been adopted, which means there is no radical break, but there has been certain issues which have been either avoided by these constituent assembly, or either they have been postponed, or either there has been some legal ambiguity that has been left within the constitution in order to interpret this provision as per unique cases. And this is how the Constituent Assembly forged a common consensus to address these diversities. So two key scholars in this regard we will be talking about on this particular question. Now let's quickly have a recap. So firstly, that Indian society is characterized by immense religious, linguistic and social diversity, okay? India is one of the world's most ethnically and linguistically diverse countries. So in order to forge a common national identity in face of this cultural, social diversity, it was obviously a great task which was there before the founding fathers. And obviously this is more because of the independence and partition that was there. Fine. So this making of this constitution gives us a very key example or a leading example of how democratic constitution writing happens despite ideational disagreements, all right? So how they have done these ideas despite the change that is there. Now, So first idea is given by Sujit Chaudhary in his work, Integration or Accommodation, the Enduring Debate in Conflict Resolution. You will have to quote the work and you will have to quote his name. And what does he say? So he says there are alternative institutional mechanisms, and he says how it has been done. They have taken various forms like federalism, devolution, consociational models on certain things, power sharing, okay, variety of electoral systems, special group rights have also been there, all right. So these conflict resolution mechanisms enable democracy to thrive, to sustain, to address the problems that come from the diversity, all right. Now, Hannah Lerner on the other hand says what? That making constitutions in deeply divided societies is her key work, and she says there is an incrementalist approach that is there to constitution making, all right. So what are these incrementalist means? There are various approaches. It is not incremental means slow, gradual, okay. So there has not been a completely radical break from the past, or we are not completely having radical strategies that are adopted. So avoidance of clear decisions has been there. Ambivalent legal language has been there. That's why we see today even the Delhi issues. But obviously that comes later because of the amendments. Then inclusion of contrasting provisions in the constitution. That's why many articles have conflict with each other. Fine. And even we see that how we have postponed certain decisions, that we only made uniform civil code a directive principle, right? And so there has been postponing also of certain decisions, so that at that point of time on issues which we could not arrive consensus, we have left them for the future generations to address, all right. So in this way, says Hannah Lerner, common consensus was arrived, so that despite so much disagreement in the society, or so much diversity and challenges within society, we could forge a common consensus, a common national identity expressed as we, the citizens of India, within the preamble and within the spirit of the entire constitution. Okay? So yes, how these incrementalist strategy, what are the advantages? So they reconcile deep disagreements, all right? So yes, this is how India addressed the problems that is being said. Now let's move to the next question. So very, very unique question in that sense. Let's see how many of you know about this or you've read about this. So you know the waves of modern constitution writing. We have waves of democracy also. And we'll also beautifully see that how the wave of democratization, third wave of democratization in 70s also was there in the wave of the 20th century constitution writing, okay? So what were the factors that influenced post-colonial constitutions, okay? So let's see. So who talks about these waves? So it is John Elster, okay? John Elster in his work, right? Forces and mechanisms in the constitution making process argues that modern constitutions tend to be written in the form of waves. So let's see the waves. So the first wave of constitution writing is the 18th century, okay? Now in 18th century, which countries wrote their constitutions? Okay, it was the US. US wrote their constitution. And why it was written, why constitution writing became a feature that way in the US is because what does Locke say? Locke says that we need to have what? Doctrine of separation of powers, and we need to have a limited government, okay? So that once a limited government is there, there will not be any absolute acquisition of power. So he brings in this idea of doctrine of separation of powers to have a limited government. And it was constitution also which forms a basis like that, so that there will be a limited government that will be established. That government will have to adhere to the laws, the spirit, the philosophy of the constitution in the governance of its citizen. So first wave of constitution writing comes in the 18th century, okay? And here we will be talking of the American state, US, France and Poland as well, okay? These are considered revolutionary in that sense. Revolutionary why? Because first time such kind of a idea has come into being, okay? Now it does not mean that constitutions were not studied in the ancient Greece. Obviously, Aristotle also compared 158 constitutions at that point of time. But we are talking of the waves of modern constitution writing, all right? Now, second comes the second wave of constitution writing, that is in the 19th century, okay? And this wave particularly was after the 1848 revolution, we know, all right? And newly formed states that happened in Latin America, all right? Then comes the third wave of constitution writing. But this third wave has a lot of diversity. So 20th century is marked by a lot of turbulence, transition, because there have been 2 world wars, there has been decolonization as a phenomenon, there was Cold War, and different countries went through different democratic transition. So there is, we see several waves of constitution writing in the 20th century, okay? So when we talk of the several waves, so after World War I, which countries did constitution writing, okay? So newly created states like Poland, Czechoslovakia, right, and defeated Germany. So it adopted the Weimar Constitution in 1919, okay? Then post World War II, many countries like Japan, Austria, Italy, Germany, all of them had been writing on their constitution. New provisions had been adopted. Those countries which were influenced by the Soviet influence also in Eastern and Central Europe. In Asia and Africa also, after decolonization happened. Okay? Then the third wave of democratization. So in this phase also, a lot of countries are writing constitutions. Okay? So this happens with constitution Greece, Portugal and Spain in 1970s. So both of these waves of democratization also leading to constitution writing. Then constitutional transition happens in 1990s, all right? Right? This happened because of the fall of communism in Eastern and Central Europe. And obviously apartheid in South Africa, they also brought in new ways. Then early 21st century constitution writing comes into being because of regime change, okay? There was also fall of multiple dictators, and this also led to new constitution writings. Countries like Kenya, South Sudan, Asian example, others, all right? So we see Egypt, Tunisia, Iraq, Afghanistan, this has also brought in a different set of modern principles, Nepal in constitution writing. Now, what are the factors with respect to post-colonial constitution writing, okay? So, what is the key challenge in the post-colonial constitution writing? So, those constituent assemblies that have been, there has been a debate that they did not enjoy complete sovereignty. There was a limited sovereignty because all the people have not directly elected, okay, within the constitution by the people of the particular country. So, however, despite limited sovereignty, also because of the colonial rule and the influence, this has influenced the particular writers, the features within. So, we have a lot of structural features that have come from the Government of India Act 1935 also, all right? So, this is how colonial rulers, how they have shaped the constitution writing in the post-colonial countries. So, there is an impact of the legacies of these colonial rules acting as a key feature in the constitution writing, all right? And obviously, we have a mix in a lot of features that have been adopted, parliamentary form of government from Britain. Now, however, what does Sunil Khilnani, Vikram Raghavan and Arun Thiruvendangam argue in comparative constitutionalism in South Asia? Yeah, they argue that India's case has been very unique in the post-colonial wave of constitution writing. That we enjoyed, despite, there has been a debate that the Constituent Assembly enjoyed limited sovereignty. Rather, there has been a high degree of sovereignty and trust and legitimacy enjoyed by the Constituent Assembly of India in internal spheres also and in the external sphere across the world also, okay? So, the Constituent Assembly of India was really representing the people of India, okay? And this is because we have been able to succeed despite the partition challenge, despite the diversity challenge that we faced. And that transition has also formed, that constitution has also formed a key structure of how democratic government is working in India. So this itself shows that yes, there is a huge legitimacy, sovereignty that has been enjoyed by the Constituent Assembly and the founding fathers. Okay? So two very unique questions. I hope you learned a completely new wave of constitution writing. I don't know how many of you would have studied this before. All right? So I hope you enjoyed today's two very important questions, and this will help you even in GS. All right? Thank you so much. All the very best. Take care.